Good day, everybody. Good day, everybody. Welcome to this particular training today. I want to take time to look at how the scope is actually developed and the ways to generate alternative and explain the guidelines to develop a project statement and create a WBS. Okay, we are going to be fast with this, so you have to, put on your seatbelt and as you join me. Okay, the project scope is made up of approved requirements that will get implemented through the project work, but not exceeded by the project work. Okay, now the project scope statement is a description that includes what the project scope is, quality requirements, project deliverables, constraints, and assumptions of the project work. Each component includes the project scope description, acceptance criteria, deliverable, project inclusion, constraints, and assumptions. Now, when we talk about project scope, we're looking at approved requirements that will get implemented through the project work, but not exceeded by it. So we are looking at what the project is there to do, the requirement, what it is there to deliver. That's what you're doing when you're scoping a project. We're looking at the work that is to be done in order to achieve the deliverable of that project. There is also something referred to as product scope, which is the product of that project, what is being produced at the end of the day. Okay, let's proceed. Now, this is an example of the project scope, how it looks like. Okay, now let's look at the process for the defined project scope. Its inputs include scope management plans, project charter, requirement documentation, organizational process assets. We have tools and tech, including expert judgment, product analysis, alternative generation, facilitated workshop. Then the output at the end of the day, we'll have the project scope statement and project document updates. Okay, now product analysis. This method is typically used for projects that have a product as a deliverable. Okay, depending on the specific product, a number of analysis methods can be used. So what you use to analyze the product of the project, you have things like product breakdown, we have system analysis, requirement analysis, system engineering, value engineering, and value analysis. Then we have alternative generation. There are a few of them. We have lateral thinking, brainstorming, dogfight technique. Lateral thinking has to do with creating approaches to problem solving in which the team attempts to think about a problem in a new way and generate a fresh solution. So when you are thinking outside the box, you are doing what we refer to as lateral thinking. Okay, now we have brainstorming, which includes structured and unstructured approaches. The goal is to just generate as many ideas as possible. Now, the dogfight technique is a technique that extracts or summarizes anonymous expert group inputs to choose among various alternatives. Okay, it is often used to arrive at an estimate or a forecast. Okay, now guidelines to develop a project scope statement. It includes review the scope management plan for the alternative for developing projects, monitoring and controlling the project scope. Then review the project charter for high-level project descriptions. Then you review the requirement documentation to select the requirements that will be included in the project. Okay, so these are the steps required when you are trying to scope a project or develop the project scope statement. Now, with the project scope statement, after the project scope statement is developed, we now create what we refer to as the work breakdown structure and the work breakdown structure dictionary. The three of these items will help us to determine in total what the scope is. Anything that is not found in any of the in any of these ones, that's the scope statement, the WBS and the WBS dictionary, is not part of the scope. Okay. Now the WBS is a logical grouping of project deliverables arranged in a hierarchical structure. A WBS defines the total scope of work required to complete the project. A WBS organizes and defines the total scope of the project and represents the work specified in the current approved project scope statement. Okay, the work is referred to as the product or the deliverable. Now, this is the structure of the WBS. We said that the planned work is contained within the lowest level of the WBS component, which is called the work package. Now, each level of the WBS breakdown, and the WBS breaks down the work into more and more layers until the work package is at a level that is assigned, estimated for cost and duration, and tracked individually. Okay, now this is how your WBS looks like. We have the projects, we have the various groups, then they are now broken down into work packages. So now this numbering format is known as code of account. Okay, now we have the control account and the planning packages. The control account, these are points within the WBS that are tracked by finance to verify that the costs are within budget. Okay, while the plan package, these are placeholders for work that is yet to be determined by a requirement. They are placed within the control account but does not have specific activities applied. Okay. Now, code of account, like I said earlier, is a numbering system that used to number the element of the WBS. Then we have the WBS dictionary. A WBS dictionary is a document that retains all WBS component information, such as deliverables, activities, code, assignment, and scheduling information. It can be used as a reference when assigning and researching individual WBS components. Now, let me explain this a bit more. Like what we have here, this is WBS. Okay. Now, each of these things, they are representations of activities. They are not in detail. So when you come down to the WBS dictionary, they are actually, giving details on things pertaining to the deliverable, the activities, the code assignment, and the scheduling information. Okay. Now, process to create the WBS. The process is executed by dividing up the project work into smaller chunks. Okay, and this is known as the composition. So the input we have the scope management plan, the project scope statement, requirement documentation, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. Now, tools and tech, you have the composition, expert judgment, and the output, we have the scope baseline and the project document update. So the composition, the level of the composition is based on specified project needs and the level of granularity required to manage the project effectively. Then we have steps for the composition, identify the deliverables and the work tasks necessary to accomplish the deliverable, structure and organize the WBS, decompose high-level WBS scope component into low-level components, then develop and assign the required identifications code to each component, review the composition of the work package and verify that they are aligned with the project requirements. Okay, so this is an example of the composition. We have the value chain system project. There is decomposed into need analysis, need assessment, standard development, system engineering, project management. Then we have the need assessment is further decomposed into current systems, audits, we have requirement determination, and so on and so forth. Then the current system audit is decomposed into component identification and component analysis. That is how it is broken down into various components. Okay, now scope baseline. It is composed of the approved version of the scope statement, WBS, and the associated WBS dictionary. It is once you don't find anything in this tree, that thing is not part of the scope. So once this is approved, we have baselined it. That means you cannot add any other item to the scope except it goes through the change system that is in place. Okay, so these are components that are actually part of the scope baseline, so you can go through that later. Guideline to create a WBS. We have reviewed the scope management plan that specify how to create the WBS from the detailed project statement, okay, project scope statement. Now review the scope statement for a description of the requirement, review the requirement documentation to understand what needs to be produced, review the enterprise environmental factors such as the specific WBS standard, review organizational process assets such as policies, procedures, and so on and so forth. So these are the guidelines. Okay, this is a scenario question, and as where this particular lesson ends. Okay. Okay. Let me see if you can actually go further to do one or two more lessons. Okay. Now we need to talk about time. Okay. Now before we do that, okay, let's go ahead and talk about time. Then after that we can end for today. Then we'll go to other items we have. Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, now this talks about timing, okay? In this lesson, you learn to plan schedule management, define project activities, sequence activities. Okay, so let's see how that is done. Okay, plan schedule management. A schedule management plan is subsidiary plan of the project management plan and identifies a scheduling method and scheduling tool to be used for a project. The components are, we have project schedule model, accuracy, units, organizational procedure link, control threshold, rules, reporting, process description. Okay, now process to create schedule management plan. We have the project management plan, project charter, enterprise environmental factors, organizational process assets. Then tools and tech, we have expert judgment, we have analytical technique meetings. Then output at the end of the day, we'll be having the schedule management plan. Now, when we talk about analytical technique, what are we talking about? The plan contains decision to use fast tracking or crashing to shorten the duration of the project. And other unique choices include rolling wave, leagues and lag, alternative analysis method, and method of reviewing the schedule performance. Let's see what we have here. Okay, let me talk about some of these things that I mentioned. When you talk about fast tracking and crashing, these are schedule compression technique. When you do fast tracking, what you are simply doing is things that you would have done in parallel. Okay, when you do fast tracking, things that you would have done in parallel, you actually do them together. That is fast tracking. But for crashing, you do crashing by adding more resources to a work to shorten the duration. The problem we have with fast tracking is that the risk is actually increased, but for crashing, the cost is actually increased. Now, for rolling wave planning, we are talking about progressive elaboration, whereby you plan things that you have to do in nearer time, in more details than things that you have to do later time. Okay, leads and lag, alternative analysis. We are going to actually need some of these things as we go further. Okay, now this is the guideline to create a schedule management plan. We review the project management plan for information to develop the schedule, and so on. We can actually go through each of these things. Now, this is actually a scenario, but we'll have to skip that. Now, project activity definition. An activity is an element of project work that requires action to produce a deliverable. Activity lay the foundation for estimating, scheduling, executing, monitoring and control, and monitoring and controlling the project work. Characteristics of an activity: it has an expected duration, it consumes budget and human resource. It is named in the verb now format. Okay. Now, the process to define project activity. We have schedule management plan, scope baseline, enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets as inputs. Then tools and tech, we have the composition, rolling wave planning, expert judgment. Then output at the end of the day, we have activity list, activity attributes, and milestone. Now for rolling wave planning, it is an iterative planning technique in which the near-term work is defined at a detailed level and the future work is left at a higher level until it becomes near-term work. It is a form of progressive elaboration of developing the work package into activities as more is known about these work packages. Okay, now we have activity list, activity attributes, and milestone list. Now, activity list includes all the activities for the project. Each activity should have an identifier, a title, and a scope of work description of what needs to be done to complete that activity. It is used to build the project schedule. Now, activity attributes, this describes each activity on the activity list and can include duration, resource cost, components, identifiers, logical relationship to other activities, and any imposed date constraint. Okay. Now we have milestone list. It contains a significant point. Is a significant point or event in a project. The duration of the milestone is 0 because they represent a specific point in time. Okay. Now, guideline to develop activities. We have reviewed the schedule management plan for information on the level of details needed to manage the work. Review the scope baseline for WBS, deliverables, assumptions, and constraints. Then review the enterprise environmental factors, publish commercial information, project management information system, and so on and so forth. Okay. Okay. Summary. Okay, this is a summary of this lesson. Now, this is actually where we will end this particular lesson so that we can continue, so that we are trying to make the videos as short as possible. Thank you very much.